Hi everybody, welcome back. In today's mini lecture we're going to be talking about two of the models of communication. We'll talk about the linear model, which is referred to oftentimes as the Shannon-Weaver model. Those are the researchers or the academics who came up with the model. And then we'll talk about the transactional model. If you were to do a quick search on your favorite web browser, whatever it might be, or you're taking a class, you might be talking about a different model of communication, and there are many of them. There's so many different components to communication that once scholars started looking at it and trying to identify and model communication, what ended up happening is we got a lot of models, and so there's different strengths and weaknesses and details to all of them. But for the purposes of this mini lecture, we'll go over the linear and the transactional, and I think by the end of the video you'll have hopefully a more firm understanding of how communication functions for you in a variety of different contexts, but most importantly, in your day-to-day interactions. So to start, we have the linear model. The linear model is made up of three primary components. We have a sender. The sender is essentially the person, the entity who crafts a message. They send that message to and through a channel, so that's how the message gets from the sender to the receiver. So this is the basic idea of the linear model of communication. So we have a sender who crafts a message, a channel, this is how the message gets from the sender to the receiver, and then the receiver takes in that message. This is not a bad model, especially considering it was one of the first, if not the first, models of communication. But one of the things that stuck out to people immediately was that it's very limited in its application because it is linear. It's unidirectional. The sender sends a message through a channel to the receiver, and that's it. Now, you might be able to say, okay, well, I can see how this might work with different technology like radio, like television, but a lot of the time, and especially in our current kind of technological landscape, we are actually, it's not linear and unidirectional either. So if you're watching a television show, or you're on social media, or you're watching your favorite content creator on YouTube or whatever it might be, or TikTok, they are getting feedback from you. And so even with technology now, it's not linear. So this model captured technology kind of like radio and television when it was initially being used, but as technology has advanced, this has become more and more inadequate. So the linear component is an issue, but then also one of the assumptions of the researchers, the scholars, when they were developing this model was that the receiver was a passive receiver, that the information that they were being exposed to by the sender was being absorbed in 100% accuracy, intent, and meaning. Now, you all know as people that that's not quite how communication works. It'd be nice, but I don't think it ever actually works like that. Right? You say something, you craft a message, you send it to the receiver. Human beings are active receivers. You could put a group of people in a room, have them all watch the same movie, show, advertisement, and they could take something different away from that because each one is an individual and is actively engaging with that material differently. There's actually a concept for that. It's called polysemy, which means multiple meanings, but I digress a little bit. So the linear model is a good start, though. Issues are that it's linear and that the receivers are seen as being passive. Now we fast forward, we're going to skip over a bunch of other models, and we get to the transactional model. The transactional model is kind of built off of the linear model, so we have sender, channel, and receiver, but we add to each one of these components. So to start, in the transactional model, the sender is not just seen as an entity who's crafting the message. The sender is seen as the entity who's crafting the message, and they are encoding. They are encoding the message with meaning. So they are taking their intent, their meanings, their emotions, who they are, applying that, encoding the message with meaning, and then sending that through the channel to the receiver. So the channel now also works with the message, because the message and how we craft this message is going to depend on the channel, or we can also think of this as the medium. So the medium is the channel. It is how we get the message from point A to point B. All right, so a very famous saying is that the medium is the message. So the idea there, that comes from Marshall McLuhan, who's a Canadian scholar, media scholar. And the idea there is that the medium and the message, these two things are directly linked. They are intertwined. When we change the medium, we change the message. We change the way that we craft the message. We change the way that we encode that message with meaning. I'll give you an example of this here in just a second, because that might sound a little bit confusing. So the sender encodes the message with meaning, develops that message based on the medium, sends it to the receiver. Now the receiver, we know, is an active participant in the communication process. So they are not just soaking up that message, they are decoding that message. They're decoding the message, and in decoding the message, they are functionally translating the message. Now, I don't know if any of you are multilingual, but what I know about decoding and translation is that it's an imperfect process. So immediately I'm like, okay, that makes sense in terms of communication, because there's so much miscommunication, so much room for error and for conflict and for miscommunication in any given conversation. That makes a lot of sense to me, because this is inherently an imperfect process, because we are functionally translating a message to try and make sense for ourselves. We're thinking about it from our own lens, or our own schema of culture, of identity, of language, of any and all of the things that make us us. We are decoding that message through those different lenses. So we have some translation error that comes through immediately. So before I move forward, I just want to give you a couple of examples here of how the medium impacts the message and really impacts how we communicate as a whole. So say, for example, we are having a face-to-face conversation. I am talking to you, so I'm the sender, I'm encoding a message. That message is vocal communication, assuming, right? Vocal communication, including nonverbals, that's the medium. So I am crafting a message in that way, using tone, eye contact, language, word choice, body language, gestures, and then you are receiving that, decoding it, and trying to make sense of that message. So that's just a one-on-one kind of conversation. But say I change the medium or the message, I change our context. Context will come into play here in just a minute, so we'll add it to our model right now. We change the context because the context directly links to and is impacted by the medium and the message. And now instead of having a conversation, we're texting. We're texting back and forth. Say we're being really diligent or really good about how we're texting. And so for the sake of example, I have my phone out, I'm texting you, you have your phone out, you're texting me, and we're having kind of like an instant messaging kind of conversation. In that sense, I am sending you a message, I'm encoding that message with meaning, I'm crafting the message based on the medium and the context. So if we're texting each other, I would probably be using emojis. You are then receiving and decoding that message and trying to make sense of what I'm trying to relay to you, trying to make sense of that message and that meaning. We're making meaning together to a certain extent. And so you are decoding and trying to understand how I'm using emojis. That in and of itself highlights how the context, the medium, and the message are directly excuse me, are directly impacted by each other. So one thing to keep in mind, and you could really easily find examples of this, emojis are difficult. They are not, they are dynamic. Excuse me. I'm going to leave this in the video just to show We're not all perfect. Okay. So, emojis are very dynamic in how we use them and how they make sense. It depends on the sender and the receiver, our ability to encode and to decode. So say we're texting each other, I would send emojis that I think you would understand how I'm using them in the context of that conversation. Say you are messaging a grandparent or a parent, and they're relatively new to emojis. At this point, it seems unlikely, but just play along. There are lots of different ways that a message could be decoded differently. So just thinking about that really highlights some of the nuance to this particular model. Okay, so we have context, we have medium, we have message. We've got a pretty good idea of what's going on here. So now we need to add in another component that was really, really important for bettering our understanding of communication, and that was feedback. So what the transactional model added was feedback, or a feedback loop. And functionally what this did is it turned the sender into a receiver and the receiver into a sender. So when we are communicating, we are simultaneously sending and receiving messages at the same time. So it's transactional in the sense of I'm communicating with you, you're communicating with me. Now, this all varies depending on the context, the message, the medium, and the feedback. So say something like this. It's a recorded mini lecture. You might be watching it on Canvas in one of my classes. You might be watching it on YouTube. You might be watching it somewhere else, right? That context directly impacts how we communicate. Now, we are still sending and receiving, maybe not simultaneously, but there is still feedback coming in. Say on Canvas, I can see how many people have watched it, how long they've watched it for, whatever it might be, and maybe students have reached out to me and asked questions or posted on a discussion. That's feedback depending on the context, right? Say it's on YouTube, I can look at how long people typically watch the video, if there's any comments, if there are subscribers, those kinds of things. That gives me feedback, and that's dependent on the context, and then I'm crafting the message based on the medium. So I'm recording this so it can be watched at any point in time moving forward, whereas if we were in class or having a face-to-face interaction, it would be different because the context would be different, right? We'd be getting different kinds of feedback and crafting the message differently. If we were in class, I'd make it a little bit more nuanced, probably expand on those examples and those details a little bit. But for the sake of the recording, this covers the kind of key components of the transactional model. We're leaving a couple of things out related to noise, worldview, and some other things that are a little bit more nuanced. But in general, I think that you can take these concepts, apply them to most communication situations in your day-to-day life out in the wild, and hopefully gain a better understanding of how communication functions, and maybe think a little bit more critically for yourself about how you might be able to communicate more effectively in different contexts. All right, that's it for this mini lecture. Good luck, everybody. If you have any questions, please reach out.